You're listening to the Happiest Lives podcast with Jill Lillard, episode 143.
Welcome to the Happiest Lives podcast, where you'll learn to think better, feel better, and become the woman God says you already are. Here's your host, Jill Lillard.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Happiest Lives podcast. This is episode 4, the final episode in this series, Why We Keep Missing Each Other. And today we're talking about how emotional connection actually gets created in everyday moments when it feels hard. So this may be a friendship that you're thinking about, your marriage, family relationships. When you are wanting to be authentic in that relationship, you want to feel present, and something just feels off. It feels uneven, or it just feels a little awkward or fragile. This is usually the moment when you might say, I understand what you've been talking about here in this series, but what do I do? How do I take this and help my relationship? What do I do when it feels hard? And so that's what I want to do today. I want to get practical and down into the nitty-gritty. So over the last few episodes, we've been backing up. We are widening the lens out to get the bigger picture. I'm not here to diagnose a relationship, but I want to help you understand why that connection might be difficult, even when you care about the other person and they care about you. So in episode 1, we talked about attunement. That connection isn't built through agreement or problem solving. It is built when you are able to sense and respond to another person's inner world. So most conflict isn't really about the issue. It's not about the thing you're fighting about. It's not about the burnt bagel or the trip that you want to take or the boat that you want to buy. It's about the experience of feeling unseen, misread, or alone in the moment. We miss each other. It's not because we do not care, but because we're turned inward when the moment requires us to turn outward. So in episode 2, we talked about push and pull. When your connection feels threatened, you may not get calm, you may get strategic. Your defense mechanisms may go up. Some of us may push into the relationship in a forceful way, and some of us might turn away from the relationship. We might shut down or withdraw. And it's not because we're trying to be manipulative or immature. It's because our nervous system is trying to protect connection the best way it knows how to. So push and pull aren't personality flaws. They are protective strategies. In last week's episode, we talked about the word attachment, the concept of attachment. This isn't about pathology. A lot of times we think of attachment disorders, but that's not what we're talking about. They are patterns shaped by your temperament, your experience, and learned safety. Okay, so attachment isn't just something that we address when there has been some sort of trauma. It is something that we all experience. So this is the work of Sue Johnson. She's done a lot of work on attachment, and the work that she's done is very helpful. She's the founder of Emotionally Focused Therapy. Attachment patterns show up most clearly when we're under distress, when that connection feels uncertain. This is how we are reaching for connection in those pivotal moments. So here's the real question that the series has been moving toward. We want to find the answer to this question. How do I stay emotionally connected in imperfect, uneven, or limited relationships without forcing it, faking it, or abandoning yourself? Now, before we talk about how to do that, we need to slow down and name what emotional connection actually is, because emotional connection isn't a vague concept and it isn't mystical. It is something very specific, and you can feel it in your body. When emotional connection is present, you are perceiving it as the feeling, the experience of being known, of being felt. You don't feel like the person is trying to fix you or analyze you or correct you. It's just an experience of being sensed and received. It feels like enough safety to be real without this pressure to perform, persuade, or explain yourself away. You feel like you could just be you. You don't have to manage the moment. You don't have to force clarity in the conversation that you're having. Emotional connection feels like presence. Someone is with you, not trying to move you somewhere else. That's at the core of it. Now, this is really important because many of us have learned to confuse connection with other things. We think connection means constant closeness, deep conversations, emotional intensity, talking everything through. Or we might think it means that we're in agreement, that we're doing empathy well. But none of those guarantee connection. You can be talking all the time about everything and still feel emotionally alone. So if connection feels elusive, it's often not because you're not trying hard enough. It's because you're aiming for something adjacent to connection instead of the thing itself. Emotional connection is about presence that allows you to stay real. It's about you staying present. Everything else is secondary. So here's the shift underneath this entire episode. Emotional connection is not created by saying the right thing or fixing the moment. It is created when your nervous system and the other person's nervous system feel safe enough to stay present together. Now, that may sound really simple, but it's actually a big shift for most of us because when connection feels shaky, our instinct is to do something. We may try to over-explain everything. We might try harder. We may think if I just find the right words and say it better, if I get it right. But connection doesn't come from effort in that way. It comes when we are oriented. I've been reading a book called Super Communicators, and underneath all the language about communication, there's a really helpful insight. Most of the time, we're not having the same conversation at the same time. So one person is talking about how something feels, and the other responds with logic or solutions. One person is sharing something vulnerable, and the other tries to move the conversation forward. When this happens, connection breaks, not because everyone is uncaring or unskilled, but because the response didn't meet the kind of moment that was happening. That's not a communication failure. That's a loss of attunement. And this is the shift. Emotional connection isn't about saying more or saying it better. It's about what's going on inside of you. It's about slowing down enough to notice what level the conversation is actually happening on and responding there. When someone is sharing emotion, your presence matters more than clarity. When someone is sharing vulnerability, safety matters more than solutions. Connection forms when the other person senses you're with me. You're not trying to move me somewhere else. That's the ground everything else in this episode is built on. So you can see this play out in a friendship. Imagine a relationship with a lot of shared history. There's genuine care there, trust, years of knowing each other. In many ways, it feels safe, easy, familiar. But then something significant happens. Grief, a hard decision, a season of change, and you notice a shift. You try to talk about what you're carrying, not to persuade, not to fix, just to be known. And the other person doesn't really meet you there. They might listen, but not respond much. They might change the subject. They might focus on facts or solutions when what you're sharing is emotional. Now, it's not because they don't care, and it's not because they're being unkind, but because those kinds of conversations feel overwhelming, confusing, or threatening to their sense of stability. So the connection feels uneven. You find yourself reaching more, initiating more, holding more of the emotional weight of staying connected. And over time, something starts to hurt inside. It's not because the relationship is bad, but because the level of connection you're wanting isn't being met. And this doesn't just happen in friendships, it happens in marriages. You might be trying to stay emotionally present, to talk about what you're feeling, to slow things down, and your spouse responds with problem solving, defensiveness, or distance. Or maybe you're the one who struggles to stay present when emotions run high. You feel flooded, you shut down, you don't know what to say. Same relationship, different nervous systems, different ways of coping. And suddenly you're not linking up, even though you're both in the room. This is the place where people start to ask, what do I do now? Do I lean in more? Do I pull back? Do I protect myself? Do I risk more? Those are the questions we're going to sort through next. The first thing to know is this: not every disconnected relationship means the same thing. When connection feels off, we tend to assume there's one right response, either lean in more or pull back. But there are actually different situations that look similar on the surface, and they require very different kinds of wisdom. So instead of jumping straight to what should I do, we need to slow down and ask, what kind of situation am I actually in? This is a discernment question. So I want to name 3 common scenarios, not so you can label yourself or someone else, but so you can respond more honestly and with greater wisdom. And most relationships will move through more than one of these over time, sometimes even within the same season. The point isn't to label, it is to orient. Now, the first situation is when there really is a capacity for deeper connection, but your defenses are getting in the way. In this situation, when you soften, the other person tends to lean in too. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's not all smooth. It's not rainbows and daisies, but there is responsiveness and repair is able to happen. There is curiosity on both sides. The relationship can hold emotion, even if it feels a little awkward. You might notice that you stay guarded, you stay in your head, you keep things controlled or contained, and usually that makes sense. Maybe you learned early that vulnerability wasn't safe. Maybe staying fine has worked for you. Here, the work isn't pulling back. The work is softening, risking being present, letting yourself be seen without managing the outcome. The second situation is when you're carrying most of the burden for emotional connection. You initiate the hard conversations, you name what's happening, you try to stay present, and when things get emotionally complex, the other person shuts down, deflects, minimizes, or goes quiet. Once again, it's not that they're being cruel, and it's not because they don't care. Emotional closeness probably feels overwhelming or disorganizing for them. Here, vulnerability on your part doesn't lead to more connection. It often leads to more distance. And this is where people exhaust themselves. The work isn't more vulnerability. It's acceptance and healthy boundaries. Letting go of carrying the relationship on your own and reducing that overfunctioning. Allowing the limits to be what they are. That's not giving up. That is responding to reality. The third situation is when you're expecting something from the relationship that it may not be able to provide. This one is subtle. The relationship might be kind, polite, warm. In many ways, it's stable. But you're wanting a level of emotional depth, meaning making, or resonance that just isn't there. It's not because anyone is wrong. It's just that the relationship wasn't meant to carry that much weight. Here, the work isn't fixing or confronting, and it isn't self-protection. It's recalibrating expectations and often grieving, letting go of what you hoped this relationship could be while still receiving what it can offer. That's real work. Why does this matter? All 3 of these situations can feel the same emotionally. They all involve longing, confusion, disappointment. And if you don't slow down and discern, it's easy to practice vulnerability where boundaries are needed or practicing restraint where courage is needed. Discernment is learning the difference. And I believe if you turn toward the Lord, that is a place where we can be vulnerable. That is a person that we can trust. He is sovereign and He is good and He is faithful. And so we can always turn toward Him and know that He has our back. And He can give us wisdom of how to look at, how to respond to our relationships, how to see the other person in the space in between us. Here's the anchor across all three situations. Stay emotionally present to yourself. Don't abandon yourself to manage the relationship. Don't force connection. Don't fake closeness. Now, this is where our faith becomes essential. Jesus doesn't ask us to collapse into people or control them. He invites us into truth, presence, and dependence. Not self-reliance, not codependence, not self-abandonment. When I say stay emotionally connected to yourself, I want to be really clear about what I mean, because this is where things often break down. What usually happens when we feel like someone else is emotionally unavailable is that we become emotionally unavailable too. Not intentionally, but when I feel dismissed, unseen, or rejected, something happens inside me. I start to feel anxious or panicked. I start to doubt myself, and without realizing it, I may begin to dismiss or reject myself. Now, I don't do this out loud. I don't say that I was wrong for feeling the way I was feeling, but internally, there is maybe some shame, some way of shaming myself because the other person didn't respond in a certain way. But if I really believed my feelings had value, if I really trusted that what I'm experiencing mattered, I wouldn't be so undone by the fact that the other person isn't validating me. That tells me something important. Often what we're most upset about in these moments isn't just their response. It's that their response touches a place where we've lost contact with our own worth. So staying emotionally connected to yourself doesn't mean hyping yourself up. It doesn't mean convincing yourself you're fine. It means staying connected to the truth that your worth and value are not being decided in that moment. They're already given. This is where faith becomes essential, not as a fix, but as an anchor. And when I say faith, it's that relationship with Jesus. It's staying connected to yourself by staying connected to the heart of God. The truth that He sees you, He loves you, that you are enough in Him. He is with you. You are not on trial in this interaction. When that grounding is there, something shifts. You're less defensive. You're less self-righteous. You're less panicked about being understood. You can be honest without needing the other person to immediately agree or validate you. You can stay present without collapsing or hardening. And yes, we need other people. We're formed in relationship. We learn to love and be loved with real humans. But our ability to love others well and stay emotionally available, that comes from being rooted somewhere deeper first. When you know whose you are, when you're connected to your own heart and through that to the heart of the Lord, you can bring security instead of urgency, grounding instead of pressure, presence instead of performance. And that's what I mean when I say stay connected to yourself. It's what allows you to create space for your emotions and for theirs without abandoning yourself or trying to control the outcome. I want to take that idea and bring it into the moment where things usually fall apart. This is when your body gets activated, when your mind starts spinning, when you feel that pull to either shut down or push harder. These access points aren't things you do to make connection happen. They're ways of staying anchored. So connection has room to emerge. So I'm going to give you some access points. I'm going to give you 4 access points so that you don't abandon yourself when the connection isn't happening in the way you expected. So the first thing is to stay connected to yourself in the moment. When I talk about staying emotionally connected to yourself, I don't mean mentally telling yourself to calm down or think differently. I mean staying in your physical body, mentally, emotionally staying in your body. Because most disconnection happens when your body goes into threat before your mind even catches up. So here are some very practical ways to stay with yourself when this happens. First, you need to slow the moment down physically. That might look like taking a slower breath than feels natural. letting your shoulders drop, unclenching your jaw or your hands, relaxing your posture right there in that moment, planting your feet more firmly on the floor. You're not trying to relax yourself completely. You're simply telling your nervous system, I'm here. I'm not in danger. Everything's going to be okay. This is not an emergency. Second, I want you to name what's happening inside you. You don't have to say this out loud. It's just an internal dialogue. Something as simple as, I'm feeling tightness in my chest. I feel the urge to explain. I feel the pull to shut down. Naming the sensation keeps you connected instead of disappearing into the other person's response. Third, I want you to bring your attention back to your own experience instead of monitoring theirs. When we feel threatened, we start watching the other person, their face, their tone, their silence. Staying connected to yourself means shifting your attention inward and asking, what am I actually feeling right now? What do I need to stay present? Not what do I need to say, but what do I need to stay here? And finally, anchor yourself in truth rather than outcome. This is where faith becomes very practical. You might remind yourself, I am seen even if this other person doesn't see me right now. My worth isn't being decided in this moment. I can stay present without being validated. That kind of grounding doesn't shut down emotion. It steadies it. And when you stay connected to yourself in this way, you're much less likely to become defensive, self-righteous, or emotionally unavailable in response to someone else's reaction. Hey, I just want to let you know my signature class is back. It's called The 4 Things You Must Do to Become the Happiest Wife. And no worries, if you're not married, this can help you with any relationship. I've completely redone it, re-recorded the lessons, and updated the workbook. And it's free. If you've never gone through it or it's been a while, this is a really good time to take a look. If you feel stuck, frustrated, or disappointed in your relationship, then I'll walk you through 4 shifts that can change how you think, how you respond, and how you show up. You can check it out at myhappyvault.com or in the show notes. There's a link. Now let's get back to it. Now, once you've located yourself again, the next question becomes, how do I respond there without forcing connection or pulling away from myself? Here's a simple way to think about it. Ask yourself this. Is there any sign that my openness is being received? That doesn't mean the other person has to agree with you. It doesn't mean they respond perfectly. It just means there are some signals of presence. Curiosity, softness, staying in the conversation, even quietly listening. If there is, then leaning in makes sense. Leaning in might look like sharing a little more honestly, naming what's underneath instead of skimming the surface, letting yourself be seen without trying to manage how it lands. But if you notice that openness is met with shutdown, defensiveness, dismissal, or overwhelm, that's not a clue to push harder. That's where holding steady becomes the wise response. Holding steady doesn't mean shutting down or giving up. It means staying emotionally regulated without continuing to offer vulnerability that isn't being held. It's recognizing that maybe the other person doesn't have the capacity for the conversation right now either, that they're emotionally flooding and you're giving them the space to self-regulate. You're not closing your heart. You're keeping it from being carried alone. Sometimes holding steady looks like saying less. Sometimes it looks like changing the subject. Sometimes it looks like simply staying present without trying to deepen the moment. This fork helps you stay honest and self-respecting. You're responding to what's actually happening, not to what you wish were happening. When emotions rise, words often disappear. And that's usually when people do one of 2 things. They either say too much or they say nothing at all. Both are usually attempts to manage discomfort, not to create connection. Instead of scripts, it helps to think in terms of anchors. Anchors aren't lines you memorize. They're ways of staying oriented when the moment feels unsteady. Often the most connecting move isn't saying the right thing. It's staying present with what's actually happening. Now, let me give you 2 examples. Imagine you're talking with a friend or a spouse and you share something that feels vulnerable, and the response is short, distant, or flat. In that moment, you might feel the urge to explain more, defend yourself, or emotionally pull away. A language anchor doesn't push or retreat. It might sound like quietly naming what you notice. Something just shifted. Something doesn't feel right here. Or naming what you feel without blame or explanation. That landed heavier than I expected. Or it might be an internal boundary. I don't need to keep explaining myself right now. None of those are meant to fix the moment. They simply keep you present and honest. Even if the other person doesn't move toward you, you haven't abandoned yourself to manage the relationship. Now, the second example, I want you to imagine a similar moment, but this time the other person stays present. You share something that feels vulnerable for you. They don't fully understand it, but they don't shut down either. Here, a language anchor might sound like, I'm not looking for you to fix this. I just want you with me for a minute. Or, this feels vulnerable to say, and I'm noticing I want to rush past it. Those kinds of anchors slow the moment down. They invite presence without pressure. And if the other person leans in, even if it's not perfect, connection has room to grow. The key is this: you're not using anchors to get a certain response. You're using them to stay aligned with yourself while you see what the moment can hold. Naming what you notice keeps you from arguing with reality. Naming what you feel keeps you honest without blaming. Naming a boundary, internally or externally, keeps you from overgiving. You're not trying to sound emotionally skilled here. You're staying real, regulated, and connected to yourself. And that's what allows emotional connection to remain possible without forcing, faking, or abandoning yourself. And even when you do that, when you stay present without forcing, faking, or abandoning, the moment doesn't always resolve. Most people leave interactions like this and immediately start replaying them. We go back over what we said, what we wish we'd said, what we think we should have done differently. That kind of replay usually pulls us further away from ourselves. It keeps the focus on performance, on whether we handled it right, instead on whether we stayed present. So instead of replaying the conversation, I want to offer a different kind of reflection. Ask yourself, did I stay in my body during that interaction? Did I tell myself the truth about what I was feeling? Did I abandon myself to manage the relationship? Or did I stay with myself even when it was uncomfortable? Those questions bring the focus back where it belongs, not on whether the conversation went well, not on whether the other person responded the way you hoped, but on whether you stayed anchored, honest, and whole. Now, sometimes when you ask those questions, the answer is going to be no. No, I didn't stay connected to myself. No, I shut down and I changed the subject. No, I disappeared emotionally. And this is where many people turn the awareness into self-criticism and they start beating themselves up. They tell themselves they failed the moment, but that's not where growth happens. If you notice that you lost connection with yourself, the question isn't, what's wrong with me? The question is, what did I learn? Now, recently on the podcast, I shared a moment that I had just like that. I was at dinner with a friend. Something she said touched a place in me, and I had thought I had worked through it, but I realized we never really resolved it together. And I immediately felt it in my body. I felt emotional. And instead of staying with it, we changed the subject. On the way home, I caught myself replaying the moment and criticizing myself for not handling it better. But then I stopped and I reframed it. The reaction wasn't a failure. It was information. It showed me that there was still something alive there, something that mattered, something that had not fully integrated yet. So the question became, what is that moment teaching me? Do I need to process something internally first? Is there a repair I want to make later? Is this showing me a limit in the relationship or an invitation to name something that hasn't been named? That's how you move forward, not by perfecting the moment, but by letting the moment become a teacher. Sometimes repair means going back and naming what you couldn't name then. Sometimes a repair is internal, offering yourself compassion instead of judgment. Sometimes it's recognizing that growth is still happening even when the moment didn't go the way you hoped. Nothing is wasted. Every interaction becomes part of your formation when you stay curious instead of critical. And sometimes the very moments that feel like losses are the ones that quietly shape the most clarity about yourself, about the relationship, and about how you want to keep showing up. So as we wrap up today, I want to bring you back to what's most practical. Emotional connection isn't something you perform or achieve. It's something you practice by staying present, especially when things feel uneven, awkward, or unresolved. Today, we talked about what that looks like in real life, staying connected to yourself when your body is activated, knowing when to lean in and when to hold steady, using language anchors instead of scripts, and reflecting in a way that leads to learning and repair instead of beating yourself up. Those aren't techniques to get a certain response from someone else. They are ways to stay grounded, honest, and whole, no matter how the other person shows up. And that's why this episode also brings this series to a close. Not because the work is finished, but because now you have a way to practice emotional connection in real relationships without forcing or abandoning yourself. If you want help taking this out of the podcast and into your actual life, I've made a couple of free resources to support you. There is the 2-minute attunement checklist that you can use in the moment. It's something quick you can come back to when the emotions rise. You can find that at myhappyvault.com/attunement. And if connection feels uncertain in your relationship, there's another free resource at myhappyvault.com/uncertain that walks you through the common patterns when connection feels shaky, that helps you stay oriented instead of reactive. Grab one or both of those, whatever feels most helpful right now. You can always find more free resources and ways to keep growing at myhappyvault.com. Thanks for being here for this conversation and for doing the honest, steady work of learning how to stay present in relationships. I'll see you next time on the Happiest Lives podcast. Before we wrap up, let me just leave you with something to think about. Do you ever catch yourself thinking, why won't he support me? Why doesn't he see this the way I do? If he really loved me, wouldn't he change? That's a really easy place to land. Most of us go there at some point, and there's nothing wrong with wanting him to change. But when your focus stays there, you end up stuck, waiting on something outside of you to shift so you can feel better. And that's where a lot of frustration builds, because you don't have a clear way to work through what's happening inside you. That's what I teach inside of my free mini course, The 4 Things You Must Do to Become the Happiest Wife. It walks you through a different way to approach this, how to think, respond, and be the woman that you are proud of at the end of the day, without getting pulled into the same patterns over and over and over again. It's built around marriage, but it applies anywhere you feel stuck in your reactions or relationships. You can find it at myhappyvault.com, or in the show notes, you can also find a link. All right, I'll see you next time.